Let's go. Streaming data free on the MTN network in South Africa.
This is Omni Sport.
T's and C's apply.
So in the middle of the afternoon yesterday, I was sitting in the office, as one does, chipping away. Working class hero that I am, down in the coal mine. And
play the violins, Mdu. Play the violins.
and I pop my head up, and I go, you know what? The Proteas are playing. Let me just check what's going on. I phone me old Maka, Kev McCallum. I say, Kev, are you seeing the score? I think it was 32-7 at that stage, or something like that.
Around thereabouts, yeah.
Kev says to me, yeah, but it's okay because it's an ODI, it's a T20. I said, no. No, this is a 50-over game.
I totally lost it. I don't know why I thought it was a T20. It was, it would have been a good T20 score.
It would have been. People are making 250 now in T20. Anyway, the Proteas lost by 6 wickets yesterday versus Afghanistan. The Proteas were bowled out in 33.5 overs at the Sharjah Cricket Stadium in the UAE. Calamitous, to say the least, but we'll let Stuart Hess, esteemed cricket writer and journalist, tell us all about it. Stu, welcome. Let's get straight into this. First up, what were you doing at the home of African cricket in Willamore Park yesterday?
Oh, morning, gentlemen. I was Kevin's old stomping ground at Willamore Park yesterday afternoon, to go and just keep an eye on some cricket being played by the South Africa A side. Was playing against Sri Lanka, and just doing an interview with one of the players afterwards. I suppose in keeping with the theme of South African cricket at the moment, the South African A side lost as well. So, rather poor showing all around, but it was very good to be back at Willamore Park. Some very interesting things taking place in the parking lot out there at the moment. Eye-opening stuff. Wouldn't suggest going there, but I've ticked that off for the season.
All right. So Willamore Park. Listen, Willamore Park and Willamore Park parking lot, not the place to be. And clearly being on the field for the Proteas right now in the UAE, also not the place to be. Afghanistan absolutely humiliated the Proteas last night. What the hell do we make of that match, Mr. Hess?
Well, the simplest thing to say is it was a dreadful batting performance, and that might be an understatement. I understand that Rob Walter, Cricket South Africa are happy to use these bilateral series to experiment with personnel, but you wouldn't expect the personnel that goes out there and represents South Africa to battle the level of incompetence that so many of those players showed yesterday. It was awful batting. 36 for 7, I think, after 10 overs. That's amateur, and we don't expect that from a Proteas side. And for Walter, who's using these bilateral series to try and assess some new players to try and create depth for white ball tournaments in the future. Most importantly, the 2027 World Cup, which South Africa is hosting. He would have had way more questions after yesterday than he's got answers. So that's very worrying time for him, and particularly for a lot of those Proteas players.
Yeah, I mean, you wrote in Times Live, so Stuart Hess works for Times Live magazine, newspaper, sorry. But I love this line from you, whatever statement could or should have been made that matters off the field ahead of the first ODI against Afghanistan, on it all that Proteas could proclaim was ineptitude. Other than Vian Mulder and some fight shown by Bjorn Fontaine and Nandre Burger, South Africa produced a batting performance short on attitude, skill, and ultimately runs on Wednesday. I mean, it's not the worst performance by South Africa, but it was as bad as you say. What do we make of that in terms of the next game? I mean, can they correct it quickly, or did they miss Temba Bavuma?
Look, one of the things that I suppose is good about the series is that it's so quick. So, they played yesterday, they play Friday, they play Sunday. There's not a hell of a lot of time to reflect on it, other than if you're having a batting meeting today, I would just suggest you to say, could you guys just bat better, pull your finger out? That would be genuinely, remember who you are. Yeah. I look at Reza Hendriks' dismissal yesterday, and Reza is one of those players that is rapidly playing himself out of contention. That was a nothing defensive shot to a ball that we should have just left alone. But he's going out there reaching for a ball, and then if you're going to play a defensive shot, at least show some authority. He showed none. It knocks an inside edge onto it. Aiden Markram's form is extremely worrying. I know he's standing captain because Bavuma was ill, but if you look at the T20 World Cup, if you go back even to after last year's ODI World Cup, he's really not made a lot of runs in one-day cricket for South Africa. His best performances have actually come in Test cricket. So his form is a big worry, and he's a senior batter in that side. And then there's a couple of other guys who are making their way. The only person for me was I guess it was forgivable his dismissal. Two people was Tristan Stubbs, who got a terrific delivery from Ghaznavar, and Jason Smith, who was on debut but just didn't have a clue. The rest of it, some guys, and Andile Peshlekwaya is another. Here's a player with 120 international caps, almost a decade's worth of international experience, and that dismissal was something that if you were an under 12 player, your coach is hauling you over the coals. It was awful. So there's a lot of thinking that needs to be done. I don't think a lot of talking. You certainly can't practice for anything. But a lot of, I guess some serious and some honesty needs to be exchanged among the players.
Yeah, Peshlekwaia's got a habit of getting out in stupid ways and loose shots. What positives would you take out of it, if anything? Maybe just the bowling?
Vian Mulder, I think, is a big positive. I think if I go back to the last test against the West Indies, he was player of the match in that game. And the fascinating thing was I did an interview with Vian at the end of last season, and he was incredibly in depth about how he felt and how he assessed his failures within the Proteas setup and how that affected him. And one of the things he has learned, he had a county stint with Leicestershire, is to just kind of loosen up a little bit. And I think you're starting to see that in his play in the last 12 months. So he had a really good SA20 last season. He was valuable for the Lions in the domestic T20 competition. He helped Leicestershire win a one-day tournament last year. And we've seen him put together some performances now for the Proteas, which suggests that, this kind of more relaxed mindset that he has is starting to work for him. So, whereas, like I mentioned now with Peshlekwaya, who's going backwards, as far as being an international player is concerned, Mulder, who has had 5 years now, he started as a 17-year-old, he's had 5 years, but you're starting to see the steps he's taking, that he's getting more comfortable at international level. And I think that's a good thing. That might be the only tick. It is the only tick from the batting yesterday. The bowling was good, but you're defending 106 against Afghanistan, who are looking for their first win against South Africa, so they were always going to be nervous. So I don't know that I would use much from the bowling yesterday, other than Fortuin had a good outing.
Sure, and this idea of playing cricket in the UAE for me is an interesting one, because it becomes now a matter of drop-in pitches. It's not their thing. It's not all around. Although they've got sort of an IPL setup up there, it does become dangerous in terms of playing there because of the up and down nature of the pitch. Was the pitch that bad yesterday? Was it so that spin friendly? And obviously it's exposed a lack of ability to play spin by the Proteas. But how bad was the pitch, or was it just just a poor day by the Proteas?
It was a poor day by the Proteas, and you can ignore whatever anyone says to you, even if it's one of the guys that played there yesterday, tells you the pitch was dangerous, the pitch wasn't. There was nothing wrong with the pitch. A lot of those guys have actually played there. Riese Hendricks, Markram definitely was part of teams that have been to the UAE before, played in World Cups at Sharjah. Sharjah's just a really good batting strip. It's always been that way. It's a little slower, bounce can be a bit low. I thought yesterday it was skiddy with a new ball, but there was nothing in the pitch that says 106 all out or 36 for 7. You don't blame the pitch for that. That you got to go and look at your own attitude and technique as a batter, and that's what the Proteas need to go and find answers for.
Well, another answer we might need to find really soon. Rob Walter's position as a coach. I don't know if it's too soon to be sort of putting a microscope over him, or is it just down to the team not gelling and having enough time to play together?
The Walter's position is an interesting one in that, if in the old days, I guess if you go back to the 90s or even the 2000s, wins and losses mattered in these bilateral series. What Walter has done with with, I guess, Cricket South Africa's agreement, particularly the director of cricket, Enoch Nkwe, is that, there are now ICC white ball tournaments on the calendar every year. So we had the T20 World Cup this year, the ODI World Cup in November last year. Next year in February, there's the Champions Trophy. So there's a white ball tournament, ICC white ball tournament every year. And what that means is you don't really get a lot of time to assess players. So they've agreed that, look, these bilaterals, or when we can do that. That means a lot of experimenting with personnel. So they've accepted that we're going to lose games. They will not accept losing a game in the manner they did yesterday, but they accept that they will lose games. And Walter is going to be measured by how the South African team performs in ICC tournaments. So if you take the 2 ICC tournaments he's played in, firstly, last year he qualified them for the World Cup, then got them to the semi-finals of that tournament. This year, the T20 World Cup, they become the first South African men's team to make the final. So he's got 2 enormous ticks next to his name. In the broader scheme of things, that's a success. I know when you break things down to wins and losses, it isn't. But they are measuring him by what he does at ICC tournaments, and doing that, he's been a success. So his job's fine, but he would really like some of these players to step up and take the opportunities that's been given to them.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you as well. But obviously the series has started with a bit of a cloud over it with the Afghanistan, the Taliban, and the discrimination against women. What is the point of playing Afghanistan and Ireland in the UAE? Is it good for South African cricket and good for this team?
They need matches. This series was only agreed to, I think, around June or July, with CSA had negotiated to get the series in, because if they didn't have this, I was doing a count before the series, South Africa would have played Ireland in 3 matches, in 3 ODIs, and Pakistan in 3 ODIs in December, and they would have had just 6 matches prior to the Champions Trophy. They need game time, and so they built this game time into the schedule. So they've got 9 matches now. They'll have another 2 in Pakistan before the Champions Trophy. So they need game time, and if you're going to experiment, you need matches, you need players to be put under pressure. Those conditions are conditions that the Afghans are familiar with. So, these young players that they are experimenting with will get to see that. On the moral question, personally, I don't think anybody should be playing against Afghanistan, given the stance of the Taliban government with regards to women. I mean, if you think about it and go back, South Africa was banned by the ICC for the racial discriminatory policies of apartheid. These are gender discriminatory policies being used here, and yet Afghanistan still being allowed to play cricket. So I don't see how that makes sense. And it leaves Cricket South Africa and other national unions in a very difficult position. I mean, New Zealand played Afghanistan in a test last week, but that got rained off. So until the ICC comes out and goes, no, we are banning Afghanistan, there's very little that other affiliates can do. And it leaves Cricket South Africa in a tricky spot, and they're going to get criticised. But just like other unions are being criticised for continuing to play against Afghanistan.
Cricket writer and journalist Mr. Stuart Hess taking a strong position there against Afghanistan, and a dismal performance by the Proteas last night. Really interesting thoughts there, and thanks so much for your time this morning, Stuart.
Cheers, gentlemen. Good talking to you.
Yeah, I need to find out what happened in the parking lot there. I'll talk to you later.
Ciao.
All right, that is Stuart Hess, of course, a legendary writer if you're in South Africa and across the world when it comes to matters of sport and indeed cricket as well. Quite an interesting stance there. So would love to hear people's thoughts, because we are now talking about crimes against humanity and governments and teams like that getting involved. Afghanistan, should they be allowed to play? 0788 777716. Stuart Hess says no way should they be playing, which I think is a position many people would echo. But you might disagree. Would love to hear from you. Get involved in the conversation. 0788 777716. Should Afghanistan be banned from cricket? Coming up on the other side, Kev's going to make us some money for the weekend. We'll have Kev's 5 bets.
Listen live and on demand.
Welcome to Omni-Sport.